This reading comes from Matthew chapter 16, verses 13 and 20. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do you say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by the Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he warned his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Christ. This is God's word.
Thanks be to God. Thanks. It's exciting to be here this morning and preach the first sermon from pulpit in this new facility that God has blessed us with. It's hard to know what to preach on Sunday like this. We could talk about the faithfulness of God. We could talk about the giftedness that God has given to us to build the kingdom, not with bricks, but with people. We could talk about the task that we've been called to in terms of reaching people for Jesus. We could talk about our commitment and our need to love one another, which is our call as Christians. Today I'd like to focus in, though, on what it is to be the church. There's a story of a man who was lost in a desert island, and he was there for a decade. When he was finally rescued, people were astounded to discover he had built an entire town out of palm branches. There was a movie theater with no movies, of course, a grocery store with empty shelves, and an apartment building, a department store, and several houses. And at each end of the town, he had built a church. Why had he done it? He was asked. "To keep sane," he replied. "But why two churches?" "Well," the man said, "this church over here is a place where I worship my Creator." So I was adrift. Cut off from all human contact, I never felt alone because God was with me. And even though the pews were empty, I felt that I was communing with Him. Believers also from the past, who never wore then a breath away. I needed this church more than I needed life itself. So what about that other church? All of that's the church I wouldn't be caught dead in. We all have different ideas about the church, don't we? There are some who say that the church is on its way out. And in some ways they are right. Jesus has called the church out. He is sending the church out, and one day He will turn the church out. But really and truly, the church is not on the way out. It is on the way up. Just like that Timex watch that keeps on ticking, we know that God will come one day and take us up to be with Him. In the gospel reading we had this morning in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 16, verses 13 to 20, Jesus gives the fullest and first statement about the church. What was it? What did He have to say about His church? About God's church? This morning on this very first service in this first sanctuary, we would do well to consider what Jesus has to say about His church. First of all, the glorious foundation of the church. What is it? Jesus' teaching on the church came as a response to a question and an answer session that He had with His disciples. First, He asked a question concerning public opinion. When Jesus came from the region of Caesarea Philippi, He asked the disciples, saying, "Who do men say that I am?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, some say Jeremiah, and others the prophets." as we read in Matthew 16, verses 13 and 14. Now, there were all kinds of opinions about Jesus in that day, just as there are all kinds of opinions about him today, are there not? There are some who say Jesus was, well, he was a great preacher, just like John the Baptist. Others say that Jesus, well, he's a great prophet like Elijah or Jeremiah. But Jesus is not concerned about public opinion. He is concerned about personal conviction. So we ask a second question. And Jesus said to them, but who do you say that I am? You see, it is irrelevant what your parents say about Jesus, or what I say about Jesus, or your pastor says about Jesus, or what your professors say about Jesus. The only thing that matters is what you think about Jesus. Well, Simon Peter, for once, came through. Finally, it seemed like every time that Peter opened his mouth, it was like changing feet. But this time, he got it right. And Simon Peter answered and said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Notice that Peter's personal conviction led to his public profession. He confessed Jesus outwardly. He confessed him publicly. He confessed him boldly, verbally, unyieldingly, which is the way every one of us should confess Jesus Christ, as Peter did. In response to Peter's confession, what did Jesus say? He says, and I say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. Verse 18. Well, what does that mean, friends? A little study of the original language will clear up any misunderstanding. See, Peter comes from a word called Petros. It's a masculine form of a Greek word for a small stone, a tiny boulder. But the word rock is a Greek word called Petra, which is the feminine form of the word, which refers to a strata of rock, a mountain like, a huge mountain. In BC, there's a massive piece of granite called Mount Robinson. It towers 1,300 feet above sea level. And if you go to the base of the mountain, you can pick up all kinds of pieces of rock. Well, it's kind of like stone. The stone is like Petros, which is Peter. The mountain is Petra. Jesus said to Peter, and when he said this, you are a little stone, but upon Petra, the mountain, I will build my church. Well, who was a rock? Who was a mountain? Friends, was it Peter? No, he was the little stone. It was Petra. And if you look at 1 Corinthians 10:4, it says that Christ was the rock. You see, what we build on, the foundation of the church, is Jesus, the rock. In the same book, he also said, in 1 Corinthians 3, verse 11, for no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. You see, unless this church is built on Jesus Christ, it will fall. Because Jesus is the foundation of the church. Not Peter, not the apostles, not us, not the pastor. It is Jesus who is the very foundation. Because of this, the church has a sure, a safe, a solid, an enduring, an endless, an eternal foundation. If you want the church to last, don't build it on a monument. Don't build it on a person. Don't build it on a man. Build it on Jesus Christ. He is the only sure foundation.